You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Wellborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. Joining him is everyone's favorite coach and hair model, Chris, aka Tex McQuilkin, Power Athlete's Director of Performance. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Mr. Tony Blauer, thank you so much for making the trek to Austin and being on Power Athlete Radio.
Dude, I'm excited to be here live. We've done this sort of thing on Zoom and other stuff, but to be here, the Mecca, I've seen that wall many times. To see it in person, it's be the hammer, man.
Yeah, no, it's part of our mantra.
Right.
No, it's great to have you, but more importantly, it's such a much more rich experience having people in the studio opposed from Zoom. It's so sterile, like two-dimensional.
For sure,
It's like,
for sure.
You know, there's no nuance.
I dig it. I'm excited to be here.
I feel like the Zoom was just a product of COVID and the lockdowns that, like, you know, we did it, but it just became kind of the norm that's how you started meeting with people, even people as close as next door.
Yeah, it was. What's interesting is I was teaching online for years before that, WebEx, Cisco, Skype, because I had people all over the world. I couldn't get to them or they couldn't get to me. So I was actually very comfortable with it when it started. And I'm still, what's nuts is, you know, having high-speed internet and Zoom actually saved my business. There was a scary, a lot of people who don't know, you know, what I do. All my business, my training, law enforcement, military, was in person. My high gear suit for force on force scenario training was purchased by these people. So you're entering initially the pandemic scare. So they're all deployed. And then it went through the defund the police era. And then it was them like, leaving the job. All of my business just stopped, like literally stopped. And 2 weeks to flatten the curve turned into 3 months, turned into, oh my God, I'm going to lose everything I ever built. And, do you know Steve Weatherford?
Mm-hmm. Real well.
So Steve, I got to take a sip. Hang on.
No problem.
That bar I ate, I hate to say this out loud, but I've got some nuts stuck in my throat.
I'll just leave that one alone.
Yeah, that won't be edited apparently.
Now we got to leave in the solid gold.
And so I'm talking to Steve, and I go, dude, like, this is shit, because I'm like looking around, and you know, because you do courses with federal stuff, you know what your week rate is, and I canceled 35 classes as a small company, and I didn't. Or guys like you, and I don't know how much you struggled, but you had an online business already.
Yeah.
So you had not a passive income. That's really stuck. Hold on a sec.
No problem. I mean, I can go get a plunger. We could snake it out real quick.
That'd be a shot.
Yeah, no, those bars are super thick.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I ate it too fast getting ready for this. So, I looked at 35 classes canceled, and I was like, it was like someone shoved a vacuum up my ass and started to suck up my insides. I'm like, oh my God. And at the time, my wife Jess says, hey, sweetheart, dinner's ready. And I'm like ready to projectile vomit because I was just doing the math in my head. Mm-hmm. And I went in and pretended to eat. I wasn't hungry. Are you okay? Yeah, I had a protein shake a little bit earlier. Like, I didn't want to say what was going on. The kids are at the table. I gave myself 24 hours to just freak out and called up my team the next day. I said to them, hey, you know, you can't solve a problem if you are the problem. And I'm the bottleneck right now. I'm kind of freaking out. I need us. What are we going to do? And we all pivoted and came up with ideas. But one of the things was I was talking to Weatherford, and I said, dude, holy shit. I was just sharing. He goes, like, aren't you like a famous self-defense guy? And I go, yeah, I think so. He goes, I have like 150 people who work out with me, him, on Zoom every day.
Yeah. It's insane.
And he says, I don't charge them because they're getting supplements from me and other stuff. He says, but why don't you try something like that? And literally, I was like, that conversation, I went, oh my God. I went and filmed the video, put it out to my audience, and I was very transparent. I said, I need your help if you can do this. I know this is hard for everybody, but if you've always wanted to train with me, give this a shot. And I started a garage gym 5 days a week. And I had 100 people sign up literally within days, and that saved my company.
Nice.
So I hate the Zoom thing, but it's like literally, thank you, Zoom. And I still, even to this day, I don't need to. We got classes going on. I got a team in Australia now. We got a group going to the UAE. We got stuff going on. I still teach 4 times a week on Zoom.
Oh, wow.
I love it.
Well, I mean, it's a great way to interact with people, especially in that environment. I found for podcasting, this medium where you're facing across from somebody to be such a much more rich experience.
Oh, 100%.
And then, God, I'm trying to remember I can't remember. I watched a podcast, and the individual being interviewed was a neuroscientist. Oh, actually, I know what it is. It was Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan. Was talking about how they were trying to create AI and VR and go through the whole deal. And he talked about the brain needs a 3-dimensional model to make memories. And so if everything's 2-dimensional, it becomes very hard to start cataloging and creating unique memories. And then I went back and realized that all the podcasts that we had done on Zoom, flat screen, 2-dimensional, I couldn't necessarily differentiate between them. I had to go back and listen to them to remember finer points. But all the ones that were in person, total recall.
Interesting.
And that little piece was so impactful for me. So whenever I have the opportunity to do one in person, I kind of jump on it.
Yeah. And so, me being so close and you, of course, you know how this came together, but your audience doesn't. I had a pit stop in Dallas, and it was like, dude, stay an extra day, come on the show. And it was like, let's do it.
Yeah.
So.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market.
We've built our online training business by partnering with Train Heroic and helping us deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training.
And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best tech and training, go to trainheroic.co/powerathletehq.
So I'd love to get into fear. I know it's, your mantra, it's really, no fear. But fear is described as one of the 7 basic emotions experienced by humans. Fear arises through the threat of harm, through physical and emotional, psychological, whether it's real or imagined. And it's such a fundamental piece of who we are as humans. You think about from a evolutionary standpoint, fear was probably what allowed us to get to this point.
Alive, yeah.
I mean, something big's out there growling. I can't see it. It's dark. I'm probably going to stay in the cave behind the rock so I don't go get eaten. Without the element of fear, we probably would have been killed off long ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when it comes to the word fear, and I know I'm not going to say your name is synonymous with it, but in terms of like knowing, understanding, mastering, and more weaponizing fear, you probably know more about it than anybody, at least that I've ever come across.
I think I appreciate that because it's huge. I really believe that if we could teach kids and teachers and parents and adults how to understand the psychology of fear as different from the physiology of fear, that we would improve people's self-awareness. And if we improve people's self-awareness, we improve their critical thinking. If we change critical thinking on the planet Earth, the pendulum might start to swing. So fear, like in terms of origins and the evolution, like fear kept us alive, and that's why we're here and dinosaurs aren't. Fear of starving to death created hunting, right? So there's a flip on it because we think about the fear as moving away from danger, but at some point, fear becomes bravery. That's my whole focus is how do I help you, your family, a cop, a soldier, whoever, turn fear into fuel. There's going to be situations in our lives where we get a fear spike that is outside our anticipated comfort zone, where you're training somebody and you know what his PR is, and you go, dude, today we're going up, and he goes, oh man, coach, I don't know if I'm ready. And you're going, dude, you got this in you. Just remember that and what you're doing is you're moving him from comfort zone to discomfort zone. But if I said, hey, what's your max bench or deadlift? And then I put an extra 100 pounds on, like a lot of people wouldn't even try it. They would just go, holy shit. And I actually refer to that literally as the holy shit zone. So I've got comfort zone, discomfort zone, holy shit zone. And the holy shit zone puts you in the fear loop. And you could be an MMA fighter, a jiu-jitsu guy. You could be a mom, a dad. Something happens in your life. A stimulus gets introduced too quickly. Financial, relationship, medical, violence. And it's just happening too fast, where you just haven't anticipated it, or you haven't prepared for it, and you've done no scenario for it. And the body, in whatever terms, wherever you're from, goes, holy shit. And that fear spike creates doubt. Doubt creates hesitation. Hesitation creates procrastination. It's at the procrastination phase, John, that we need people to have that self-awareness switch to go, okay, I'm not moving now. The house is on fire, and I'm going, my business is going, is tanking, right? I mean, a lot of people in the last few years, some took their lives, some left their families, some let their business go, and some people got to work and got busy and reinvented themselves or whatever. It's not the biomechanics. You know, I like to talk about in the tactical training. I remind people, your technical skills are the least important of everything you bring to this fight. And people, selective listeners, hear that as Tony just said technique's not important. You know, like, no, you know lots of guys with good technique that can't optimize all the mind, body, spirit elements because of fear. And I've been studying this shit since the 80s, when I unpack anything and I unpeel any onion, metaphoric onion, at the end of it, if I say, hey, let's go to lunch tomorrow, later today, and you go, what do you want? I go, I don't know, like, you want to go for sushi? You want to go for a burger? All hesitation is a product of fear. I don't want to make the wrong choice. Which way should we, go to the airport? It's rush hour.
It feels like a lot of pressure.
Right.
I mean, I figure if we're going to go to lunch, even if the lunch isn't good, I'm going to eat lunch tomorrow.
Right.
If we make a wrong turn, we have the ability to make a U-turn.
Right.
From its fundamental basis, do you ever go within a definition of fear to allow people to, create a framework to build upon?
Yeah.
I know a power athlete, much like my influence with Greg Glassman, I thought it was extremely intelligent that he defined fitness.
Yeah.
And then you put a definition together, and then it allows you to create a framework in which to build your training system. For me, I defined athleticism, because that's when I really realized our technology and what we were going after was developing and fostering athleticism, so it required a definition. I wonder if there's a foundational definition, because when you mention fear, it's really just an emotion, but it's more than that. It's this wedge. It's a high tide. It's a wind. I mean, it's all these things. It pushes people and becomes one of the most fundamental forces within life to force you into doing something.
It is the most, and very astute of you and very interesting, because I've been saying this for years. Everything we do in life runs through a conscious or unconscious fear filter. I was having a conversation yesterday with my wife over our toothpaste, where she's using toothpaste with no fluoride in it. And she just went to the dentist and she asked the specialist there, hey, is fluoride good or bad? And the dental assistant said, there's nothing wrong with having it in your toothpaste. Well, my wife, Jessie, had bought off on some no fluoride, but an expert said fluoride. So it's like, it's the which wolf do you feed? Mm-hmm. It's the fear. Even though people who know what I do, it's the startle flinch conversion and covering the head and push away danger. Like, fear works at a noxious level. Hey, go ask her for a date. She's out of my league. She's not, I'm going to get rejected.
Yeah. Fear of rejection.
Yeah. And so, like, fear is way more than just an emotion. And there are schools of thoughts that go, fear isn't real, it's an imagined event, blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, but fear produces cortisol. Is cortisol real? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fear creates hesitation and doubt. And so accidents happen. You were supposed to hit the gas, you hit the brake. You were supposed to duck, but you froze. You got deer in the headlights. Fear has killed people. Yeah. By heart attack, by stress. So fear is very real, even if it's not real. And I love, and I use an acronym in our training, false expectations appearing real. False expectations appearing real. It's when I'm visualizing an event in the future that's debilitating me in the present. It's that simple. And that's the magic of, like, when when you learn like the system that we've mapped out, where you go, okay, I get a fear spike, I can't control that. I was doing this, and all of a sudden, fear spike. My physiology will change. I'll go from parasympathetic to sympathetic. Everyone's got fight, flight, freeze, and all that. I go, that's all irrelevant if we don't have a coaching blueprint, but it needs to be our coaching blueprint. I can't call you up and go, hey, I got to lift a heavy weight. It fell on somebody I love. Which script do I use? Is it like you're doing? Dude, get the fucking weight off, right? You gotta move. We don't have time to warm up in life sometimes. So this idea, I've been saying this for decades, that who you talk to, therefore who you marry, where you work, how much money you make, where you live, how much weight you lift, and whether or not you defend yourself are all determined by your relationship with fear. The fear spike happens first. And so, this, the mind navigates the body. Mm-hmm. And everyone uses the term muscle memory, but there's no such thing as muscle memory in the way people want it to be. Mm-hmm. Muscles don't have the capacity to store memory, but you've got neural patterns, and you train your brain to do certain things. And then when you forget that you're thinking about the initial technical, I'm going to pick up my phone, I'm going to reach for it, and then you just do it, you go, oh, that must be muscle memory. But it's a neural pattern.
Well, the muscles don't store memories, but actually emotion is stored within the fascia.
Right.
That's why you see people go and get like myofascial release, and all of a sudden, things come to the surface, crying.
Sure.
Dr. Bueller, who does the AMIT, activated muscle integration technique out of Kaysville, Utah. That's the base of his whole work, is actually working through the fascia to help, people.
Fascia's got some crazy shit in it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's blows my mind whenever I look at any of the fascial research, but I think people get stuck within patterns. And I mean, I'm sure you've known people that tend to be very negative. They're negative about everything, the Chicken Little type of mm-hmm. individuals. And I think fear becomes almost like a thin, hard candy shell for them to hide into. And I tend to not want to be around people that are extremely fearful, or more importantly, the people that are constantly kind of weighing what could happen, or what's the worst thing that could happen.
What's interesting is through your mentoring, your family, your coaches, you're a big guy and a good athlete, your pro sports background, and then the discipline to show up every day, build your business. You're wired a certain way. And if we could eradicate fear on the planet, like everything would change. Yeah. So my No Fear program, spelled KNOW for people who are listening to this and not watching this, I don't believe in NO fear. And I had every one of their shirts. I make the joke all the time. I had every one of those No Fear shirts because I wanted it to do something for me. I was one of those guys where if you knew what I was thinking, John, you wouldn't like me, mm-hmm. but I would never say, I'm really scared here. I would always show up, but I was scared my whole life, which is why this is very personal to me. I was a very high-level skier. I was an excellent wrestler. I played every single sport, but I never could hit flow state and repeat it. I never got on a podium. So I'm one of the best skiers in Canada growing up, and I would wipe out every race. So people go, oh, self-sabotage. I go, but I showed up and I tried hard. If you asked me, do you think you could win? I'd go, yeah. But something would happen when I'd go to perform.
Was it like a mismanagement of emotion? Like you couldn't, this happens all the time in the NFL. I mean, you have individuals that come in that have all the talent in the world, big and strong, fast. I mean, they move great in practice. They look like they're going to be future Hall of Famers. All of a sudden, you go to Sunday, you get in front of 100,000 people, you put your game unis on, you're walking out the tunnel to hear, the crowd roar. And as you peek out there, all of a sudden, I watch those guys go, shh. Yep. For me, I would stand there, and as soon as they called my name, I would run as fast as I could to almost the point of like wiping out to try to get on the field. And people always ask me, why'd you run so fast onto the field? And I'm like, because I was trying to get into the fight as quick as possible. Mm. I remember seeing Mike Tyson sprinting out of the locker room to get into the fight. He didn't want to, take the long walk. He just like, let's get this going. If we're going to fucking do it, let's do it.
Did you know, let me interrupt you, that Tyson used to throw up and cry before his fights?
I learned that later.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing because I mean, during his heyday, he was ferocious and scary, right? No socks, just the shoes on, no top, run out to the ring.
Yeah, just the cut in the towel.
Dropping people like massive men, had welterweight speed as a heavyweight, just a freak, scary man. Imagine if we didn't know who he was, John, and I got an underground pass. I know somebody at the fights, and I go, hey, let's peek our head in this changing room. And we go in here. Oh, this is Mike Tyson. Who's he? I don't know. And we open the door, and then we see the guy looks up, and he's got tears coming down his eyes. I go, you want to bet on this guy? You go, no.
Sure.
Right? And George St. Pierre recently came out with talking about fear. And I got this clip that we show in all our presentations now, where I go, like, here's like one of the winningest, badass guys in the world. And he says, look, the scariest day of my life is every day I had to fight. I hated it, I dreaded it. He says, I'm not afraid to talk about fear, and I was afraid. What I'm getting at is all these people learned how to manage their fear. And so, you know, when you said, hey, I don't want to be around that because it's contagious. I always tell people fear is contagious.
Sure.
But so is courage.
Yeah.
The trick is, and so what my thing is I'm not like a guy who came up with a cool acronym who went, I can make some bucks on this. I have lived with fear my whole life and still do as a parent. My kid's going to be okay. Why is my daughter not home right now? I got to get on another flight. Shit. I hope the pilot's okay.
I don't think you can live your life worrying about things that you can't control. I learned long ago that the only thing that I can worry about is what's within my domain, like what I can touch. If I'm driving on the highway, there's no way for me to put myself in a position. If this guy's had a few drinks, all of a sudden he steers off and hit, and it doesn't do anything for me to be fearful about it. So as an NFL player, I could only control what was within the confines of what I could touch. I mean, if I could touch this guy, I can help him, and what happens within it. And then my preparation, which was both physical and mental, and really I think after thinking more and more on this, it was actually the physical preparation that gave me confidence. Like the mental stuff was always fairly easy. I was always fairly intelligent, could pick stuff up. But it was actually the physical training and the crucible of that gave me enough confidence to realize that whatever gets thrown at me, I have a certain set of skills that will allow me to be successful. I just have to be able to aim myself in that direction and fucking go 100 miles an hour.
So I would describe you as like the unicorn in that event. So for example, I was a really good athlete with anything, but I'd be up at bats going, don't strike out and let the team down. I was worried about, I knew I belonged there. I knew I had talent, but I was worried about the coach and the team. And I have no idea that was something in the upbringing. Wow. I would be at the top of the hill, getting ready to ski. And it would surprise me when I would catch a tip on a gate and wipe out. I mean, I'd expect spectacular wipeouts. One that where I fell so hard I broke a helmet on a downhill race, ended up in the hospital unconscious. I mean, just like insane. I'd go after it, but I couldn't stay in. It'd be like the guy who's running, who outruns the football, and you're going, dude, you ran too fast. You need to find the balance of speed and precision and accuracy and timing. There's like a whole bunch of computations going on. When I would get an adrenaline dump, so I'd be at the top of the hill above a ski line, no trees are there, the wind is howling, and I'm sweating, and my heart's pounding, and my hands are wet inside gloves. You know the scene in Dumb and Dumber when they're on the motorcycle and they're frozen? I mean, that's what it's like. If I had been crying, my tears would have been right. So if I had been Tyson, I'd had puke on my face and tears on my... And, but here's what was going on with me. I was thinking, if I'm so good, how come I'm so scared? What, like no one had ever told me this change in physiology is your adrenaline. This change in physiology is what the body sometimes does before something really important to you or something dangerous that you're going to do.
So in essence, fear is a superpower.
Fear can be a superpower if you turn it into fuel. Mm-hmm. So what you said is very astute. It's like, why worry about the future? Why worry about stuff you can't control? So the trick is, that's why I said our program and what we try to do is help people improve their self-awareness, because self-awareness can change critical thinking. So the person that goes, I'm worried about those drivers, our system says, you can't worry about the driver. You need to worry about your driving.
Sure.
Do you know how to drive? Are you taking precautions? Are you diffusing your vision? Are you on your phone, looking in the mirror, putting makeup on? So it's that moment where I intercept the movie. So a neat metaphor for your listeners is, because you're the unicorn and you figure this out.
Well, so for me, as I'm listening to this, I always more had a fear of failure.
Okay.
I had this like unconscious fear that somebody was out there doing more than me, and I would meet that person and they would best me because they had worked harder. Mm-hmm. And that was the 5 a.m. kick in the pants every single day for me to go train and do all the stuff, is the thought that somebody out there might be doing more.
So that's fascinating. Two things, because I remember a Tyson interview, speaking of Tyson, where he's up, it's 5 a.m, he's out running in the winter, up in the Catskills. He's got the camera guy is on the back of a flatbed. They got a camera on, and he's running, and the guy says something to the effect of, Mike, it's 5 a.m. This is an ungodly hour to run, meaning why don't you run at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m? And he says to the guy, like, why are you running at this ungodly hour, 5 a.m? And he smiles and says, because I know my opponent's still asleep.
Yeah.
And so you use that fear to spur you on, to turn you into a better athlete.
Yeah.
That is also the connection that you made, that you're doing things that other people don't want to do. That discipline creates a resiliency, like a resiliency in events. You only create resiliency after shit. You can't pre-build your resiliency. But because you were doing stuff where you were imagining a more formidable opponent doing something more, you were actually building that in advance, so that if somebody hit you or caught you on a tackle, or that opportunity was there, you went, I know how fast I am, I know how strong I am.
Yeah, and even people get into situations where, like, what if this guy punches me? I've been hit a million times, and I've taken a lot of punches. And unless that individual is a highly trained individual who has a very unique skill set that puts him in like the top 1%, there's a good chance that he's not going to knock me out.
Kind of like a Liam Nielsen type.
Like, let's say you're in a bar and, like professional fighters in there. You look over and the dude's got totally cauliflowered ears, and you're like, that guy's probably pretty switched on. I know I could probably take a few of these hits. Whereas people get in these nervous situations, and we were talking a little bit about it. About 2 or 3 months ago, I was approached from one of the local BJJ guys here, Shandy Ribeiro, who's from Six Blades, to help start working with his young fighters. So I started training these guys 3-4 days a week, and then I thought it was kind of a little disingenuous that they were doing my training, but I wasn't doing theirs. So I started going up and doing some BJJ stuff with them, which is kind of ironic because about a year ago, we had Craig Douglas and Jeff Gonzalez on the podcast, and Craig was like, hey, you should come to one of my courses. I was like, great, let's do it. So about 2 days before the course, he calls me and goes, hey, I'm having a course this weekend. Do you want to come? And I was like, how long is it? He's like, it's Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. It's like 30 hours. I'm like, fuck. Sure, I'll do it. What do I need? 200 rounds, a pistol, a cup, and a mouthpiece. I'm like, all right, so I'll show up. And it was
eye-opening.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, we had an incredible time in terms of one-on-one fighting on my feet. And I think I'm more than switched on. Where I really struggled was on my back. Mm-hmm. There was a big dude there. It was one of the starting strength guys. Nick is 6 foot, 300 plus pounds. It put me on my back, put him in basically side control, gave us pistols, and he shot me here and here with the Sims. I still got the scars. And I realized I have zero defense on the ground, just because as an offensive lineman within my sport, the last place you ever want to be is on the ground. And if I'm on the ground and a dude's on top of me on my back, everything has gone wrong. Mm-hmm. The number one, I'm sure you remember, back in the 80s, before the Gracie thing got real big, the number one rule of involvement in any form of street fight is you don't go to the ground. Mm-hmm. Because, the minute you go to the ground, you can get kicked. That's when bad shit happens. So in this environment, to start me there really exposed a weakness for me. And then this popped up, and I realized, hey, if I'm going to progress, I have to literally go into the darkness and potentially go in and do this. So I've been doing that a bunch of days.
For you, man.
Yeah.
It's scary how much these little guys can weigh when they know how to relax into the situation.
Yeah.
It's like, how much do you weigh?
Oh yeah, especially when they're laying on your ribs, and it's been just extremely helpful for me in terms of like the technique and that. But also, I don't have any fear of tapping out. I don't have any fear of getting hurt. My skill set. Shandy's pretty funny. He's like, it's like you're a video game and you have like a superpower button. He's like, stop using your superpower button because I can always use speed and strength and just fucking get out of shit. And it's been pretty interesting. But as we were kind of going through this and people were asking me a little bit about my own training, I started martial arts when I was 6. So my older brother got beat up by a local bully. My dad wasn't a fighter. Took my older brother down to this local dojo, Japanese dude, Shotokan, and he started training there. And within about 3 or 4 weeks, my dad just took my other brother and I. And we did that for 4 or 5 years. And we pretty much, it was old school. The dojo was like hardwood like this, no mats. You kneeled the entire time, shin hops. I mean, the dude had the bamboo bokken stick he'd walk around and crack us with, whole Japanese, only spoken Japanese. And that was, what we did almost every single day.
Crazy.
So it wasn't until I think I was 10 years old and there was an older kid that, tried to pick a fight with me. And I remember he pushed me and I remember I had a backpack on and just like tightened my straps and ended up smashing him. And when I hit him, I saw him like break into tears and he started getting this like emotional crying. And I was completely, stone-faced because we had been in so many fights. We had rehearsed this so many times. It was so natural that it just felt like this is what we do. And same thing, going and playing the NFL, the fighting never was an emotional thing. It never scared me. I never was worried about getting hurt or, this guy would best me. And if it happened, I knew I could get my way out of it. So I think it was from such a young age that the fighting, and then even going and picking this up, somebody asked me, are you nervous? I'm like, not really. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I get hurt. I mean, shit, I played 17 weeks with a broken leg in the NFL. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen?
You have a very different upbringing than a lot of people. And that's a neat thing. Like, and you said it right when we started the talk, that there are guys that were maybe better talent than you. This guy's faster, stronger, but he couldn't handle the 100,000 people. He couldn't handle the pressure of that game day. And I wrote something about this several years ago about fear, that on game day, you can't be a different athlete. It's all mindset on game day. Yeah. You can't, and the same thing goes for a fight. The same thing goes for everything. The moment of truth, you need to step up, and it's all going to be psychological shit because the skill sets are as developed as they can be on that given day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody ever rises to the occasion. I never saw anybody who was average within practice all of a sudden put the game unis on, run out there, and turn into fucking Superman. The SEALs talk about nobody ever rises to the occasion. They just fall to the level of their training. It's true. The person that you are, within the confines of training, the things that you do every day, that becomes the norm. And then all that happens is you go out there, the competition gets turned up a little bit, and you just rise to the occasion. Like the skill is always there. It just, the speed gets turned up in the NFL between practice and game day. And all you do is you just crank it up a little bit of a notch. It's not as if all of a sudden I have to go leaps and bounds. It's always there. You're just going 80, 90%, and then you just go to 100 or a little bit more. Yeah. But the biggest one for me was I always had like a weird ability to kind of tune shit out. I remember getting into my stance, hearing, and I knew the crowd was roaring, but never heard them. Everything was really, really silent. Things seemed to happen in slow motion. And I just never really got distracted by stuff.
So those are like literally, I've said this a couple of times, like, I would describe you, if I was explaining your recall to another audience, I go, John's a fucking unicorn. This doesn't happen to a lot of people. So auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, tachypsyche is a big fancy word for things going into slow motion. That would happen to you more frequently than other people. Gave you, that was more of you being able to step into a flow state where you're not worrying about somebody yelling at you. I remember somebody just sent me, I think on the color commentary for UFC 10, Ultimate when Tank Abbott fought
Dude,
Don Fry.
First of all, huge Don Fry fan. Okay. Anybody with that mustache fucking rocks. Yeah. But the old UFC stuff, I watch it constantly.
So, dude, I don't know. So a friend of mine from Montreal, where I used to live, he said, hey, weren't you in that? What was it? I said, I don't remember. So he pulls it up on the app and he watches it. He said, and this guy trained with me for years. He says, I've never seen you nervous. You were nervous there. And I said, well, they hired me when SCG owned the UFC they flew me to New York, and I talked to the producers and Joe Silva and all these guys, and they wanted to bring me in as a guy to sit beside Jeff Blatnick to talk about the emotional, psychological side of stuff and just have that counterbalance from...
Yeah, like a little color commentary.
Yeah, and I was going to... But the day of the event, they said, hey, we don't want that. We want you to interview the fighters. I'm like, okay, that's something you hired me for, but I don't do that stuff. So now they had me, and I make this joke. I was so bad they hired Joe Rogan. I was so nervous. But why was I nervous? Is one is it was like they gave me something that I had no experience about doing, and I had no interest in doing.
Sure.
But I was there, and they had for live TV, you have an earpiece in, and the producer's talking to you. You know this. Sure. I'd never done that. No rehearsal, no nothing. So I'm literally like backstage talking to Don Fry, and the producer's going, ask him what his strategy is. And I'm like, let me talk to the guy. Like I'm trying to do this. It was all over the place, and it was nuts. And I use that example only because, I coach people on public speaking. Number one fear in the world, public speaking.
Yeah.
Not getting dragged to a secondary crime scene and tortured. Public speaking.
Sure.
So someone will say to me, hey, can you help me with my public speaking? I go, yeah. Okay, what's the problem? They go, I'm afraid of public speaking. I go, you seem to be doing okay. They go, I'm just talking to you one-on-one. It's when it's like a group. I go, okay, tell me about your family. I got a wife, I got 2 kids. So do you text them? Can you cut my food for me? I'm afraid of knives. Pass me they look at me. I go, do you talk to your family? They go, yeah. You're not afraid? They're like, no. I go, but I thought you said you're afraid of public speaking. They go, listen, Mr. Blauer, I know you're trying to be funny here, but I'm afraid of public speaking. And what I explained to them is you're afraid of speaking in public to people you don't know, and you're afraid of one person in the audience and what they might think of you. There's somebody important in the audience. You've assigned some sort of importance to this event, and now you're focusing on that as opposed to your speech. You have the skills, you wrote a speech, you have a message, you want to say something, just go do that. And that's the critical thinking part where I realize, again, the false expectations appearing real. I'm visualizing something in the future that's debilitating me right now. That's the self-awareness piece. Now, somehow, from your family, from your Shotokan instructor, from all the sports you played, from the coaching and all of that, you have very, very quickly, almost even at an unconscious level, John, gone, I mean, you might not even realize the switch, but if you see a problem, your brain immediately goes to the solution or goes to the philosophical, I'll deal with the problem if it happens. Yeah. And there's, just like there were other pro athletes that lost their shit on Sunday, there's millions of people there are many more millions of people who could never make it to Sunday that need this idea of like, how do I manage fear? If this was a bottle of courage, the primary ingredient would be fear.
Could it really come down to being trained versus untrained? I've always had this sneaking suspicion that if you enter into something that's some form of physical training that pushes you farther than you think you could, and you do it consistently, you eventually develop like a set of, I guess it's like a confidence within yourself. I always thought this within like, NFL practice, right? So we go out there and you're pretty much playing against some of the best dudes in the world every day in practice. And, you're in these situations, and then all of a sudden you go out there and you've already done this against really high skilled individuals. Now you might face a guy who's better or worse by a few degrees. It felt like every week I was going against some future Hall of Famer or All-Pro. Nothing really changed. The speed changes, obviously. But it's not as if all of a sudden I got to develop a new technique. I mean, I watch film. I know exactly what the guy's move is. I've watched other people like me handle this individual. Mm-hmm. So I have a framework and a rubric to work upon. And all of these things end up developing a level of confidence. It's not like I'm overly confident. You're still nervous as shit because, you still have to do this. But you've developed almost a skill set that allows you to go out and be successful. And then all you have to do is put yourself in the situation, get out of your own fucking way, and just go 100 miles an
But
hour.
that's the trick. So the answer is yes and no, because, we've seen like talented boxers, like everyone who fought Mike Tyson was one of the best in the world.
Yeah.
But if you watch their eyes and their movement, they didn't look like one of the best in the world. They weren't.
Well, I personally believe that Tyson beat every one of those competitors or every one of his opponents, other than maybe one or two, before he ever stepped into
Right.
the ring. I mean, those guys were beat.
But they beat themselves. So when Holyfield dropped him, not Holyfield,
Was it Buster Douglas?
when Douglas dropped him, and this is an interesting thing in how, like, when I teach self-defense, part of our training is I ask, what'll it cost you if you don't fight back?
Everything.
Right? Could be everything. And then what I call the 3 Ps: personal, passion, and present. Who is the most important person in your life that their existence and future could be compromised if something really bad happens to you?
Yeah.
And Buster Douglas's mom passed away just before that.
I think it was like the night before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he decided to still fight, and in his mind, he dedicated
Yeah.
the fight. So it was an interesting thing. There's another, and remind me to come back to that.
Oh, no, I have a whole bunch of boxing
Yeah.
questions. We're going to
Okay.
talk
Okay,
boxing
nice,
and MMA.
sweet.
Like, I have
Oh,
a
sweet.
whole sheet on that.
So the whole thing with that is Buster Douglas got over his fear, if he had any, and went, I'm going to do this for my mom. And I'm going to become the world champion and fuck Mike Tyson. And he went at him. And it was interesting just in terms of movement in the, when was his heyday? The 90s or 2000? I don't even remember. Tyson.
Oh, it was the 80s.
It was 80s.
Yeah, it was 80s and 90s.
So you remember his TikTok, right? Right.
Dude,
So
100%.
Somebody asked me, how do you beat Mike Tyson? And I am very, very scientific and analytical. I do stuff. Like I'm not taking credit for Mir's knockout of Nogueira, but I worked with Frank Mir the week before Nogueira, and it was the first time Nogueira got knocked out.
Did I ever tell you that we walked into a strip club in Vegas and Frank Mir was the doorman?
No.
I ever tell you
But
that?
I know he worked
Yeah,
at...
he was it was Crazy Horse. Or no, it was
Yeah,
Crazy
no.
Horse or
it was that Rhino.
yeah, Spearmint Rhino.
Yeah.
The Rhino.
Yeah,
We
I don't
walked
know what
in.
you're talking about. I've
Well,
never been there.
I'll tell you, we went and walked in, and Frank Mir's fucking got that fucking head and that
Right.
jaw, and I mean he was fighting in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
and I remember walking in and like, holy shit, that's fucking Frank Mir.
Yeah.
I mean, and he even made a joke because obviously NFL players, right? And he's like, hey, I'm not going to have any trouble with those guys. I'm like, no,
sir.
not at all, Mr. Mir. And,
Right.
and then he kind of looked at me, and I was like, I'm a fight fan. I know exactly.
He's
who
a
you
big dude.
are. And fucking savage.
So I reverse engineered some stuff looking at Nogueira, and that's what we do is we go, look, this is a little bit kind of like what you say. If I've run through my mind, I've done mental rehearsals and physical rehearsals, I've got film, and people don't realize from self-defense, and it's one of the things that's really wrong, in my opinion. What do I know? I've only been studying violence, fear, and aggression for 40 years. The way people are taught self-defense is it's like saying, I'm going to teach you how to throw, I'm going to teach you how to catch, and you can play in the NFL. And you're going, like those techniques are the least important part if you don't have all the shit together, the strategy, the toughness, the endurance, the mindset. And so Mir ended up knocking out Nogueira in there. And so I can see things right away. And I go, look, I can't beat these guys, but I know what they need to do to beat them. Just my brain can figure that shit out. So it was the same thing in the 80s. Somebody said to me, how do you beat a guy like Tyson? He's so fast, he's so deceptive. His head movement is so crazy. And I said, if somebody would just punch him in the sternum, they would rock him and set up the right, because they're aiming for his head because he was a short heavyweight.
Sure.
And so he's doing this movement so quickly, it's so erratic. If I'm punching at the head and the head is moving, it's a small weapon, small target.
Sure.
I go punch the sternum's not moving. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and watch the Buster Douglas fight, watch what he does. He's jabbing into the top of the sternum here, and it's stopping Tyson and setting him up for the right. So it's neat at that level when you talk about, is it all about the training? Other people might have seen that, but if you go in there so worried about Tyson, I don't know if you remember this from the course you did when you came to the one with Jeff. There's a line I share in every course about intimidation. And it's the psychology of intimidation is this. It's when I'm visualizing what my opponent can do to me instead of what I must do to my opponent. Mm-hmm. And when you make that switch, so much of the fear just eradicates. Dan Millman, Way of the Peaceful Warrior author,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, he said, when you face just one opponent and you doubt yourself, you're outnumbered. Mm. Genius, right? Yeah. Because a lot of times you stand up and you go, am I ready? Well,
so this is what I go back to. If you've done the body of work, this is what always was confusing for me with NFL players. I'll give you a little anecdote. We were going in to play in the playoffs, and our left tackle, who was in the Hall of Fame, I mean, one of the best dudes to ever do the job, hurts his back, can't play. So they put a young guy in for him, and he's playing all week, and we're playing against Dwight Freeney, whose nickname is Fright Night for a reason, because he's like a fucking nightmare for people. The guy goes in and had so much fear about what could happen. And I mean, like, we prepped him, we did everything. All you got to do is this. I mean, just, what you do is when a guy's in a bad situation, when obviously he's outmatched and not, he's filling in for a dude, you simplify things, just go vertical. We're going to help. Don't worry. We're going to basically make you safe. And we're going in there. Everything's fine. You got it. We're good. So we come in from pregame. We're getting ready to go out the tunnel, and I'm standing right there, and he turns to me and goes, Dwight Freeney's just a man, right? Like, how good could he really be? And you remember that scene in Braveheart when they're about to go out there and the dude pisses himself and he just takes a step back? Mm. Same thing happened. I just took a step back and I realized it's going to be a bad day for this guy. If you're not anything other than like, I'm going to go fucking make the Hall of Fame. I'm going to go get my big contract. Like, this motherfucker, like, success runs right through his chest. Mm. And it ended up getting real bad for him. We ended up losing. The guy had a terrible game. I mean, he ended up going on playing longer and redeeming himself, but it was a bad moment. And I never had that moment of fear ever in my life.
Unicorn.
And
we hate you.
Well, but what I really believe happened is at that moment, he knew deep down that he hadn't done the work, not just that week, but leading up to that moment. Mm-hmm. I really think that if you've done the film study, you've done the work, you've prepared, you've trained as hard as you can, even imagining other people to train hard when they're which is totally an illusion. You don't know how fucking hard somebody's going. You imagine what they're going to do. And you've done all of those things. When you were put in this opportunity to be successful, you have no choice other than to be successful. Right. When I think it was in my second year, we went to go play the New York Giants, and they had a guy named Keith Hamilton, who was a fucking monster. He had a move where he would stand straight up. He was like 6'6", 6'7", 300 pounds. He would stand straight up and he would let you punch him. Nobody ever gives you the chest because his hands were so big that he would grab your wrists, lift them straight up, and then throw you back. And we called it the forklift. So this guy should be in the Hall of Fame. Will never make the Hall of Fame because he was like such a bully that turns into a political thing. And this guy was an absolute beast. He did it to me. He got me in this forklift, and we had a hellacious battle. After the game, I ripped his picture out of the program, and I put it in my wallet. And every time I opened my wallet for the next year, I had to look at his face. And like, I built within a rage, and everything became focused on beating this individual, whether it be training, whether it be film study. Everything came down to this one individual as the crux for my success.
This is fascinating.
And when I went out to go play against him, oh, dude, all of that rage fucking focused into him. And when he went for that forklift, I hit him. I mean, it was the heavyweight fist fight that I'd always wanted.
Right.
And I always felt that if you want to be considered great, you have to have somebody good to go against. Mm-hmm. You have to have that person. And I always think like I made my bones as a young guy playing against that individual.
Mm-hmm. No, that's amazing. So my company mostly trains trainers. And what I try to instill in them, I go, I don't care if you're doing Thai, boxing, MMA, jiu-jitsu, or if you're a firearms coach, if you're a force-on-force coach. We work with companies, with business people. I go, if somebody is not performing at what you intuit as their potential, the answer is something about the psychology of fear. Really simple. And if you're a parent and your kid is struggling with math or sports, you can smack him and go, I mean, we grew up in an era where it's like, hey, if you come home with a black eye, and you don't fight back the bully, like I'm going to beat you worse than the bully ever will, right? That doesn't go on anymore. So in most areas.
Well, did that fight that I got into where I told you I did my backpack straps and hit the kid? We ended up getting pulled in the office. They called our parents, and my mom came storming in, and she walked in, and she's like, "What happened?" And I told her, and she's like, basically, I was like, "I hit him." She goes, stay here, goes in, fucking yells at the teacher or the principal for bothering her time, comes out, and we get in the car, and she's like, "Just remember, if you fight, you have to win." Or it was basically something to the effect of like, if you fight, you better win, because I don't like losers, and you can't come home if you lose.
Nice.
And it was a pretty interesting moment, but like it was true. I mean, I just always looked at it like, I wasn't scared to fight.
So
wasn't
imagine
nervous in these positions.
somebody born in the last 10, 15, 20 years dealing with bullying or dealing with stress now.
This is part of the reason that I ended up kind of getting pulled into this jiu-jitsu thing a little bit was actually for my daughters. I had so many fights. I mean, because I had two older brothers, and we battled in the neighborhood, but also within the dojo, we had so many of these different altercations or just fucking training environment.
Right.
That by the time I was met on the street with somebody, it wasn't a big thing. And I realized for my daughters, same thing, they're the oldest, they don't have older brothers, that the first time they're in a stressful situation where somebody puts their hands on them or something goes down, I don't want that to be the first time that they've ever been exposed to it. So, I mean, in terms of the jiu-jitsu, what I liked a little bit better than the boxing and some of the other martial arts is the actual physical contact. You get used to people being on top of you or involved or grabbing you in different ways. And hopefully you
which is unfortunately more likely in an attack on a female.
Yeah, it's not as if somebody's going to punch him at distance. They're probably going to grab him in close and hold him tight,
right?
Or try to overpower them. I don't want that situation to be the first time that happens.
Sure.
I want them to be comfortable enough to be like, "Hey, man, I've been in this situation. I know how to react, and even though this guy might be stronger than me, at least I'm not going to fucking lose my mind or freak out." So that piece alone was what kind of pushed me within that jiu-jitsu thing.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, no, it's so important. So and you probably know this, but the terminology of in scenario training is stress inoculation, create these adaptations in advance. And what a lot of people don't realize is at some level you're focusing on the movements and the techniques and the tactics, but the repetition is helping the mind make decisions in advance. So what we want to do is improve our perception speed so that our reaction time is always faster. And but what I noticed was, and this is, the whole no fear division of my company happened after I developed Spear, after I developed High Gear, where I started realizing, only the people who really can control their fear are actually performing closer to what the training, when you talk about, is this untrained versus just trained? There are a lot of trained people who freeze. There are a lot of trained people who shoot high, shoot low, don't shoot. There's a very famous book written called The Fog of War, which is I think from World War II era. So this isn't, if you remember in Gates of Fire, one of the great moments in there. I don't know if it's if it was in the movie version of stuff, but in the book, we talk about the guys are sitting around worrying about the opposing army and their arrows, and one of the guys says something, when they loose all their arrows, there's so many come at them, it blocks the sun out. It's like you can't, and they were all scared about it. And Leonidas hears this and he goes, "Then we'll fight in the dark." Some line.
I think it's we'll fight in the shade.
We'll fight in the shade.
Yeah.
But the idea is like these are all Spartans, but the metaphor there for me is there were Spartans who were afraid, and then there was Leonidas who said, "So we'll fight in the shade."
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like one of the most powerful lines that I remind people is always, you can't be brave if you're not afraid. There is no bravery if there's no fear first. If I ask you to do something, I had this seminar I was doing in Orlando a couple of years ago. We had about 70, 75 people in the class. One guy's a professional firefighter, introduced himself early. I've been following along. I brought my son to this, and we're doing our no fear workshop. And I said, I'm going to ask a question a little bit later that you'll be able to answer yes to, don't answer yes. So I asked the group after going through because again, what I'm teaching people is not that there's a place where you get to, you're so well trained that you have no fear. So if I asked you, were you afraid before games, you would say semantically, no, I'm ready to go. But if you had any change in physiology, if your sleep changed a little bit, if you ate differently, if you had to pee extra times, if you had anxiety, and you're like, but what you were doing is you were turning it into fuel. You were like, here we go. This is good. Some people don't. So I didn't as a kid. I was like, what are these butterflies? No one ever said, this is okay. Go with it. See what happens. And so here I am in Orlando. We go through the workshop. I go, I got a question for you. Courageous bystander. Courageous, operative word, bystander. You have no skin in the game here. It's like, oh shit, this building's on fire. There's a car accident. How many of you know if this building caught on fire that you would run in and save the cat, save the dog, save someone's grandma? And I said, don't answer metaphorically and don't answer philosophically. You know right now. And a woman puts her hand up halfway. She goes, I'd like to think I've got a much better chance now that I can think about the idea that I need to manage fear. I'm not going to be without fear. Like I got a diploma. I don't have fear anymore. And I said, okay, that's good. That's fair. Does anybody here know for sure they would run into a building if it was on fire? And that was his cue. And he puts his hand up like this. And I turned to him, I go, that's pretty arrogant and cocky of you to know that you would run into a burning building. How can you be so sure? And he goes, because I'm a firefighter. So this connects what you were talking about is if I can get somebody to manage their fear and they have no skill, that's another hurdle. Now, if you're trained, but what this guy doesn't remember is when his first day at the fire academy, when they said you're going to run into this building, it's very important that you don't stop here and don't touch this flame, even though it's not real, it's real, right? Yeah. That there was fear there and you adapt to it if you do the training properly. So you're 100% spot on I think it's the Spartan maxim, training should be like a bloodless battle, so the battle's just like bloody training.
Sure.
Can you replicate what you believe you're going to face? I used to tell my fighters, because it was in the 80s when I ran my gyms, Tyson was, dropping everybody. It was the Hagler-Hearns era. It was Sugar Ray Leonard.
And we'll get into some of the fight stuff, but the most impactful thing I've ever seen was Tommy Hearns versus Marvin Hagler.
It's scary.
1985.
Did you hold your breath too?
We watched it, and from that moment on, and I was doing martial arts at the time, I thought kicking was stupid, and that actually pushed me into boxing. The problem was there was no boxing place I could ride my bike to, so I ended up reaching out to a kickboxing, John Barrett Kickboxing Academy that had a ring, and they had boxing classes. So that's when I got indoctrinated into boxing, and then ended up getting a boxing coach when I got to high school. But that fight, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Insane.
It was, these two guys, and I loved Hagler. I mean, since the whole deal about him like going out to the Cape and it's really hard to get up and run at 5 a.m. when you wake up in silk sheets, I think was the quote. But just an absolute monster. Those guys standing toe to toe, just throwing bombs.
Do you remember when he fought Tony Simpson? So he was so Simpson idolized Hagler, couldn't believe he was fighting him. At the weigh-in the day before, they're doing pictures. They've done their little stare down, then they turn and they face, right? Simpson puts his hand on Hagler's shoulder for the picture, and Hagler turns to him during this is on. He goes, "Get your hand off me right now, or I'll knock you out here. I will not wait for tomorrow." And you see like Simpson go, and like I told people, that was the fight right there.
Yeah.
Now here's an interesting thing. I had a picture in my gym of Hagler and Hearns, an overhead shot. Now, was Hagler a scaredy cat? Sorry, was Hearns a scaredy cat? Would you say he's like a fearful fighter? No, right? The friggin' just insane power, knocked everyone out. Made Bruce Lee and Enter the Dragon look like a fatso, right? Wrist shredded.
Yep.
I have a picture, and hopefully you'll appreciate this. I have a picture of the two of them. Hearns is throwing a left hook, and it's literally like those artificial intelligence thing now, just the striations in his body, ripping a left hook, man, like this. And Hearns, southpaw, not Hearns. Hearns is throwing the punch. Hagler, southpaw, is throwing a lead right hook inside of Hearns' lead left hook. They're spooning from overhead. And Hearns, first, Hagler is like this, leaning. You could see leaning in here like this. Hearns is doing this. In that moment, Hearns knew he was late. And what did his body and his mind do? He closed his eyes and turned his head. He had fear, and this is the most interesting thing about our research, is it doesn't matter if you're a world champion, the best in the world, a stimulus gets introduced to your nervous system where your psychological system goes, fuck. In that moment, he knew he was late, and that was actually the hook that set up the finish.
Yeah.
But it's gorgeous. But you see Hearns going, head turned. The front half of his body, John, is totally tactical. His face and his eyes and his head, primal, get away from danger. If I whip something at you here and it surprised you, your hand might come out, but your head turns away. So when I break down the stimulus to the physiological to the psychological effect, and this is the fun stuff of our research, where I go, in that moment, your limbic system and amygdala are driving action. It's not executive function anymore. So it's a fascinating thing. So you could be super, super trained, and then all of a sudden you got a thought that shouldn't be there. And that's the moment that tackle hits you, or you miss the, you miss the catch, or you just got distracted.
Do you think fear has an IQ? Could you, when working with your fighters, let's say it's GSP or whoever you worked with, is there a way to kind of assign like an IQ? Because Craig Douglas made an interesting comment after I took a seminar. He's like, in terms of the ground fighting stuff, he goes, but your propensity and your IQ for violence is so high that he's like, you put you in these situations, and he's like, you don't really get rattled, and you just fucking try to be a buzzsaw through it. He's like, your capacity for violence is really high. And as I'm thinking about fear, I wonder if there's an IQ associated with it, where the smarter you are, the more aware you are of it, and you realize how to manage it, opposed to maybe people that take your course that have never thought about fear in terms of, whether it be a superpower or a disability, whatever, but they almost have an IQ, an intelligence for fear.
That's a great question. I can guess an answer, like what I think.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, but I mean, it's something I want to think about a lot longer, because it's a cool thing. I think what Craig said to you, and this is so funny about him, is we started chatting on Instagram recently, and I said, "Hey man, I dig your shit. I can't believe we've never met in all these years, And he said, "We have." He says, "I was in one of your classes like 20 years ago." He was. I didn't even realize this, but which made me feel really old. But that's an interesting. I love that. I think your fear management has an IQ, but fear is an independent force in our body. I was a single dad raising my kid. Didn't know anything about it. Had custody of my son at 3 months old. To put him to sleep, I would give him a bottle. I didn't know you don't give a bottle of milk with all the sugars in the milk to your kid. I wrecked his teeth as a kid. And I start seeing this decay. I go to the dentist. He's 4 years old. They go, "Yeah, this needs to be fixed. He's got to have an operation." Well, they don't like to put kids under until they're 7. I had to go to the hospital, sign a waiver where they said, "Look, if he doesn't have this, he's going to be fucked. He's got to have this operation, but this could happen." Like, I wanted to throw up, man. I couldn't. I felt so guilty. I was angry at myself. And what I did was I took him to the hospital the day before, and I did a scenario with him and me. I went in, I pre-briefed I said, "I'm coming in tomorrow. He has his operation. I don't want him freaking out." And then I'm freaking out. And we walked through, we took him through it, like the whole thing. So I did a run through. And then the next day I was nervous as shit, but I know that fear is contagious. So is courage. I wanted him, the stress that was going to be on his system, I wanted to be as low as possible because I was calm. So literally in a 24-hour period, we went from, hey, this is where we're playing, this is the auditorium, but tomorrow there's going to be 100,000 people here. Visualize that now. Just like a lot of fighters like to get into the ring the day before and move around. I just got wicked goosebumps reliving that. But I was scared shitless, man. Like choking back tears the day before. I can't believe I did this. I'm putting my son at this risk. Obviously, everything turned out okay. But we went in, and the next day, it was almost like you said, like, let's do this fast. We know what the routine is. Now we're doing it for real. Okay, I'll see you in a couple of hours. Love you. Boom, out of there. Of course, I wanted to puke for 2 hours waiting.
Man, for things with my kids, I have zero superpower. My son got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes about 2 years ago.
Wow.
And we have to manage that every day. And like, I see what he goes through. And then it was a couple months ago, my daughter ended up getting bit by a dog, got attacked by a dog,
wow.
kind of fucked herself up. And we ended up having to go rescue her out of it. And like seeing that, and like for all of the blood and violence and broken bones and everything that never even, fucking moved my heart rate, to see your children in these situations and to have that, like, that is by far much more difficult for me to deal with. For some reason, like my own safety, or more importantly, any of the things that happen to me, like I have zero, like it just doesn't register.
Right.
But like, whether it be your wife or your kids or your loved ones, or your mom and dad, or whatever.
And that's a great example of, when I say stimulus gets introduced too quickly, executive function gets hijacked, your reactive brain, your limbic system, all of that starts to kick in. When you understand that protocol, have you ever done an armor's course?
Not like officially, like, but
Okay.
But I mean, I really think that I've also smart enough to realize that if I all of a sudden start showing fear, or I get stressed out, or I like have an emotion, you're 100% right. Courage is 100% contagious.
Yeah.
That if I can stay calm in stressful situations that I know, like maybe if I'm dying inside, my ability to like be calm and cool and collected.
Facade, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can put up that facade just because that's the strength that people need.
And that's a huge power. And a lot of people are good at that. One of the things that I keep pounding in, like, this is part of my messaging. So the whole no fear part of my life and my business that I realize now, where my focus was on, okay, this is the spear system, this is a scenario, someone said to me, what is the most important course you do? I always surprise them. I go, it's the mindset, because that's the only thing that can bite us in the ass. And so here, for however long we've been talking, I'm making these unicorn jokes, and then I bring up something accidentally about my son, and you go, holy shit, like that's the Achilles heel, well,
it's because I think somewhere along the line I hijacked empathy, whether I turned off that part of my brain, but I did not have empathy, and it actually was probably a superpower for me in terms of playing in that. Like I didn't fear for other people, I didn't fear for their safety, I didn't fear for my own. Like that part just seemed to just turn off, and it wasn't until I had kids, and it wasn't until that all of a sudden I was given responsibility of these small humans to raise, that all of a sudden it rekindled something within that empathy, where now all of a sudden, I realized that I'm sure why are we here, right? The standard fucking question people ask all the time. I'm sure during COVID and lockdown, more people ask that question, like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? What's the mark that we make? And I always think that the only mark that we make is on those that are around us, because at some point we're all going to die. And effectively our lives, whatever they had meaning at that point, ends and people go on. The only way that you live eternal is by influencing those around you to keep your memory alive. My dad passed away a couple of years ago. I think about him every single day, which in effect keeps him constant. I talk to the kids about him. We still talk about him as this individual. And I think the day that nobody talks about you anymore, you effectively fade into anonymity. And that's your second death, when there isn't anybody around that remembers your name. So I looked at my kids and the influence I have, and more importantly, the role as as the father for them, as being extremely impactful. And that's something I took lightly. People father kids, walk out on them, and don't give a fuck about them. And I was like, dude, one, I will never leave my kids. And two, I will always be the rock at which they can, build upon.
Nice.
And that's extremely important for me. And it almost rekindled, and maybe it re-sparked or rewired something within my brain. But that empathy piece, where now all of a sudden, like, to be connected within them, was something that allowed me to probably be more human. And like, as I think about fear, part of my task is as a parent is to really to prepare them for the day that I'm not there. When my dad was sick, he was going through some chemo, and my mom and I were like, took him. It was pretty awful. And so we were driving back, and my mom's like, "Hey, do you want to go see a movie?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to fucking see a movie." But we ended up stopping in, and I think the movie we walked into was Black Panther. And in there, we walked in, and it was the scene where he like goes to the spirit world and he sees his dad. And his dad's like, the role of the father is to prepare the son for when the father's not there anymore. And so we ended up leaving the movie theater. I thought a little bit about it. We went back, and as my dad's going through the end of his life, I asked him, I'm like, "How do you feel about this?" And he's like, I thought I would have had more time in this. And he's like, "But laying here, I'm not stressed about it, because I know you guys are switched on. I know that you guys are all successful. You'll take care of your mom. There isn't anything, like, I'm not worried that, my kids are in jail. They're dipshits. They're drug addicts. They're fuckheads. I don't have to worry. You guys are all switched on. You're all successful. You will figure out how to take care of everything." And as a dad, I felt like I did what I needed to do. And that was fucking huge for me. And I realized that's really the function. So that when you're laying there ready to take your last breath, that, the stress that, did I do enough? Yes. Are my kids taken care of? Have I armed them to go out in the world and be successful? Was I the person I needed them to be? And more importantly, am I able to take this journey on without fear of what I'm leaving behind? And that really kind of molded me a little bit as a father and as an individual to be, the person that they need, so that the day that I'm there, they're prepared for when I'm not there.
That's amazing, man. That's I lost both my parents and did not have my mom recently last year. Did not get a chance to have those conversations because of what was going on with everything here.
Yeah, which is fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, the out of this imaginary fear that somehow we were going to be, passing some deadly virus by, communing with our families and missing our loved ones. Like, you can't get that shit back.
Yeah.
And I'm still fucking mad that they robbed that from people. So
Well,
I'm
fear
sorry that
and fear has been weaponized. I mean, it always has, but more so in the last couple of years. But that's I'll be thinking about that story a lot as a parent. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, it fuels me in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
when I constantly am looking at stuff like, whatever it is, like you kind of add things like, let's say it's like a Christmas tree or your closet, you buy clothes, and next thing you almost like look at all this shit you have in your closet and you're like, what do I really need? And then you almost kind of pare that down. I think you have to do that every so often and realize, like, what's really important to you. Is it, this nicer car or this or all this other shit? Like on my dad's, in those final days, it wasn't a single moment about, man, I wish I had another Rolex. I wish I drove a nicer Porsche. I wish I had more bitchin' suits, or I'd worked more. It was all the things that we got to do as a family and all the memories we had. And I realized, like, all the material shit is fucking bullshit at the end of the day. Like, you can't take it with you. So, the ancient Egyptians tried to do it. They couldn't do it. Nobody's going to take it. In the age old, I don't want to be the richest man in the cemetery. I want to be the person with the most amount of memories. And more importantly, the greatest probably receipt you have for your life is, the people that stand up and give your eulogy at, your memorial, let's say. The amount of people that showed up. I mean, at my dad's, it was standing room only. There were people trying to get in. He had influenced and worked and helped so many people that people showed up to pay their respects. And, can you imagine? You die and nobody shows up, this fucking asshole. So that stuff became way more important to me. And I never really thought about the humanity of it or, being a father in this until you lose your own parents. My mom's still alive. She's going to live to be 200. Nice. I always joke that people like her live for a real, real long time.
Nice.
She's too feisty to go. But that's important for me. Like, who's the, like what are you portraying? Kind of like when we got into JITS, I got my daughter into it, and then she's like, "Dad, am I going to do this?" I'm like, "Fuck it, I'll do it with you." So I drive her up there and I do, the classes. I get this. I mean, like, I'm 100%, like, whatever my kids want to do, if you need me to do it with you, I'll fucking jump into the fire with you.
It's amazing, man.
And, and they're like, whether it be their homework, whatever it is, I think that, you have to decide what's important. So, but I have always, and I, not only friends and connected over the years, but I'm just so fascinated by fear. and that it could be something that both weaponizes people, allows them a superpower, but also can be so debilitating that they get stuck and they can't move. You know, the house is on fire and I can't get off of my bed and I'm going to die. Even to the point where it freezes people to their detriment, where you would think that the single most important thing would be their longevity of their life or you know, saving their own. People die in these situations because fear is so crippling. It's fascinating to me.
It's you know, with all those things, this is so subtle and it's not, when we make the simplest decision at a philosophical level, and of course I've got this bias, so it might just be my bias, where I go, you know, when you have something to do and then your kid says, hey Dad, can you do this with me? And you go, I can't now, I'm busy. And then you sit back and you go,
am I really busy?
I'm like, am I too busy for this? Because this is one of those memories of, you know, hey, richest man in the cemetery. That's my life's experience, my memories. The decision to close the computer or get off the phone call or put down your phone at the spiritual level is fear management. At the new, it's not about danger anymore. It's about, I have a fear that I'm going to lose out on this at a certain level. I mean, that's my conscious, unconscious bias and that's, so this is that false expectations appearing real, right? I'm visualizing something in the future that's affecting me in the minute, in the moment right now. And I think that if we recognize this noxious, this unconscious, invisible element that fear has on us, it starts to change our behavior, because it's going to be there. And you have a choice of, it's your fuel. You go, you know, Customato, Mike Tyson's original coach, he's got this wonderful quote that I'm going to paraphrase. He says, like, fear, like fire, can warm your house and cook your food, but if you don't control it, it could burn your house down. It could burn you. And that's our same, turn fear into fuel. It's going to be there. What are you doing with it? And you know, it's huge. You know, and it's funny because like every phase, every 10 years, like what was important to me when I was 0 to 10, changed when I was 10 to 20, 20 to 30. I've had not debilitating fear, but an unrealistic level of fear throughout my life. As a kid, as an athlete, you know, when, you know, I tell this story, I just told it to Jeff, where there was, you know, the girl you wanted to go out with in high school was named Lucy, and every guy wanted to go out with Lucy. And I'd become friends with her, but like at a distance. And I go, okay, this is prom this year. Okay, I'm going to ask Lucy out. I'm like, I see her walking in the hall. Hi, Lucy. I'm like, right? Hey, Tony, how you doing? Excuse me. Dad, did you want to ask me something? No, just saying hi. Right? Fuck, come on, man. Just so worried. Like she's the most gorgeous girl. She's not going to. So I go, next day, I go, okay, I'm just doing it. Hey, Lucy, yeah, I wanted to ask you, you want to go to the prom with me? And she's like, oh my God, I would have loved to, but I already got asked by John. And, you know, literally I'm going, John, like, I'm a better athlete than John. I'm better looking than John. I got better grades. And like, she would have said yes to me, but I was too afraid to ask her the day before. Sure. Someone had asked her. So it's like fear in our lives. Like, you know, this in marketplace, business loves speed. Violence loves speed. Yeah. If you're hesitating, I'm not talking about like rush in head first to some shit without any education, but you know, speed is the most important thing when it comes time to make a decision. Yeah. And if there's an old, you know, remember Ed Parker, Kempo? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. He had an old...
funny story. Ed Parker's nephew was my training partner in college.
No way.
Drake Parker, who I played football with at Cal, he was one of my training partners. So we went, you know, his parents live in Kaneohe, in Oahu. We got to go over there and stay one summer. And his dad, David Parker, who was an amazing dude, since passed away, was Ed Parker's brother.
Crazy.
And, told us all these crazy stories about them as kids in Hawaii, learning, where Ed learned martial arts and gave us all this history. And, Jeff Speakman, The Perfect Weapon, and Elvis and all that. So I was always a fan of Kempo and, the karate magazines and all that.
Sure.
So, just weird timing.
Weird. But the quote that I was going to share is he would say, and it's a fun one, he said, those who hesitate, meditate horizontally, right? So he was talking about like sudden violence, but that could really apply to anything.
Well, that was the one thing that I struggle with in jiu-jitsu is it's very slow paced. It's very smooth. It's this. I'm used to like very explosive kind of move. And that's where Shandi's funny. He's like, stop hitting your, power button.
Yeah.
Like you have to be smooth and like be patient in this and stop working so hard and just kind of like move through it. And it's been good for me because everything we do has always been fast, short.
It's a moving
violent
meditation for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's the opposite of boxing.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm such a boxing fan. I mean, just the fact that you take two individuals, you have all of this training build up, you put them in the ring, and these individuals get to go out and use their skill set to try to knock a man down. I mean, it's the most basic primal thing on the planet.
Right.
And, I mean, it's so interesting too. And I know you're a huge boxing fan, so I was going to kind of pivot into this. And I know it's impossible to compare boxers across generations, but people love to do it. Who would you say your top 5 boxers of all time are?
Top 5. Well, my favorite boxer is Sugar Ray Robinson.
Okay.
We'll get a list here.
He was 201 fights, 174 wins, 19 losses, and 109 KOs. Now, I mean, he fought in the 20s and the 30s, but the real clips of him fighting are incredible.
I met him when he was in his 80s, and he had already Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And I was on a trip to California in the 80s as well, doing stuff I was in Black Belt magazine first in 1980, and I would go back every couple of years and did all the magazines. And as a huge boxing fan, when I heard that he had the Sugar Ray Robinson Foundation, I went and showed up one day, and there was a secretary there, and I said, hey, is there a chance he's going to come in today? I'd love to get a picture with him, his autograph. And she was like this sweet grandmother-like lady. She goes, sweetheart, we don't know when he's going to come in. He's not doing so good these days. He comes in once every week or two to sign some pictures and then maybe stays for a half hour. She goes, I can't tell you. I said, do you mind if I just sit here and wait? She gives me this like sad face, and she says, okay, honey. And I'm sitting there and I'm reading, because there were no Kindles or anything back then. I'm reading a book, and I'm not on my phone because there's no digital phones, right?
Yeah.
I'm just reading.
There is no phone.
And right. And all of a sudden I look up, and fucking Sugar Ray Robinson is coming in. And I got goosebumps right now, John. And he comes in, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I let him go in, and then I come in, and then his secretary says, he's here. Wow. Come and, get a picture quick. And so I'm in there, and I'm like, because I used to, when I lived in Montreal, I loved running, and my favorite runs were in blizzards, because nobody was out, and you just run. You can't hear. You got your earmuffs or hat on, and it's silent, and it's just you just hear your breathing. I would run, but I would do this. I would run every morning in the winter, and then I would come back and have like oatmeal and a coffee, and I would watch old fights every morning for like 2 hours, and I would pull footwork drills and head movement and shit like that, and I'd build those into the classes, and I would watch Sugar Ray Robinson all the time. So I couldn't believe, like, this guy's like an idol and influence. Here he is. Old man, but I could see him in him, right? Yeah. The genetics there. And we're sitting there, and, he's shaking, and he says, what's your name, young man? And I go, Tony Blauer, and he starts to write a thing here. He goes, where are you from, Tony? And I go, Montreal. And he looks up, he goes, Montreal, Canada? And he had fought there in the day, and as soon as he started talking boxing, he was 30. His brain switched, and like for 45 minutes, I just sat there where he's just telling me a story about boxing and his time in Montreal. Just sudden total recall right then. It was amazing. I got goosebumps right now. So Sugar Ray, obviously Ali, Cassius Clay.
56-5, 37 knockouts.
Crazy. Loved him. One thing that I loved about Sugar Ray Robinson was he was a true champion. He was an elegant, eloquent man. He wasn't a thug.
Yeah.
You know, and he wasn't, as much as you love Ali was also about getting in your head and the show and
oh yeah, I mean, the Thriller from Manila and all that. I mean, yeah.
But even the way he manipulated the general public through to sell tickets and the stuff that he would do, genius, right?
Yeah.
Hagler, of course.
67-3, 52 knockouts.
I loved Hagler because he was so scary.
Oh, dude, the shaved head.
And I'm a southpaw.
Yeah.
I fight both sides, but I'm a southpaw, so I really dug him.
One thing that struck me was watching the fight, how long his limbs were. That I always thought he was like 6'4".
Right.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't even think he was
Long
6 feet
arms.
tall. I mean, his arm, like he moved
Like Freddy Krueger.
so well. I mean, everything was so like I'll just give you an example. Like you watch Tyson Fury fight. There's so many weird, awkward positions he puts it in that, in terms of like boxing aesthetics, it's like nails on a chalkboard for me. His movement. I mean, it's pretty interesting to see him do his head movement because I mean he's pretty slippery. But I'm just used to these individuals like Hagler, where as they're moving through space, it's so smooth.
And I also want fighters to look like fighters.
I realized long ago that I was a fan of humanity because I fought against this for a long time. I was like, fuck people, I don't like them. And I realized I was a fan of humanity I wanted to see the best in the world stand up on the biggest stage on their biggest day against the biggest rival and fucking reach and grab, the brass ring and have glory. And seeing whatever, like it's just not what I'm used to.
Right.
Like,
and these guys are like, they would light us up, right? Like, you've been hit by good boxers.
Yeah.
I mean, I was friends with the Hilton brothers, who, was it Davey Hilton fought a 15-round world title fight against, who was Hagler's sparring partner? I forgot his name. For a long, long time, they fought for the title.
Here, let me look it up.
Begins with a D. Man, I haven't talked about this in a long time. But these were 5 brothers.
Tiger Moore.
No.
The answer is obvious. 52 men. Leonard can thank sparring for Hagler. Was it Sugar Ray Leonard?
It was
Wayne
Drayton?
Fortune or
no-
Jody Brody?
no name with a last name letter D. Used to be a Hagler sparring partner. Drayton? Is that a name? I don't know. Anyways, the point of the story was like I was friends with them, and I brought Matthew, who's a heavy, and these guys were fighting like 15-round fights before things went to 12 round. That's how long.
Jesus.
And I remember doing a boxing seminar for him at my school. He sparred 30 of my students in a row, and then I sparred him. Didn't break a sweat. Literally didn't get hit once. 30 guys we were all martial artists, like we didn't understand box. And I had gone to Gleason's gym in New York, and I went in and I spoke to the manager. I said, listen, I'm a well-known self-defense instructor in Montreal. I love boxing. I've never really trained. I'm not here to sucker punch somebody or I'm not trying. I don't want to get hurt, but I'd love to spar with a pro who, like in Montreal, I can't go somewhere because people go, you're Tony Blauer, and then someone's going to take a cheap shot.
Sure.
And I stayed in my lane, but I was very opinionated about stuff. And so this guy puts me in the ring with a guy who is ranked, I think, in the top 10. He was a middleweight. I was 168 pounds at the time. And I get in there, and I'm used to sparring my students that range from 12 years old to 50 years old, and I'm like in my 20s. And I'm used to sparring, and when you're way better than your students who are intimidated by you, you drop your hands, you make a lot of mistakes that you would never make if somebody were better than you. And I get in there, and I'm so fucking nervous, John. I'm moving around, and this guy's moving here, and all of a sudden I fire a jab, and I catch him in the nose. And I say to myself,
oh, fuck.
No, but I say to myself, like, wow, that was like easier than I thought. Like, I can't believe he didn't move from that. And he's there like this, and there's like zero like emotion on it. But I just punched the guy in the face. So I go, okay. And you know that is it a biblical expression that the fall comes before the pride?
Yeah.
So I'm here like this. I go, wow. Because I was so nervous. I go, maybe I'm better at this than I thought I was.
Bing.
So I fire another one. And as I fire the second one, I see my hand, everything goes slow motion. I see my hand dip. And I realized he had watched the first one just to read what my mistakes were. And literally the second punch, I fire, and my hands, instead of coming back up, it goes dip down, which a lot of fighters do in pros. And as I see this, I see his center line here turn. And that's all I remember. He hit me between the eyes. I wake up like in a overhook, underhook clinch against the ropes. Several seconds of my life are missing in Gleason's gym, where I had a flash knockout. I'm against the ropes, the guy's on. So I had obviously flash knockout, fell back into the ropes. He came in. I was able to grab him. And the next 3 rounds were, if you said to me, okay, final question, what was one of the scariest times in your life? It was those 3 minutes or 9 minutes in the ring. It was terrifying. And I use that as an example, and I got way better at boxing. I continued to box. But I tell people, particularly martial artists, I go, boxers don't practice pulling.
No.
And boxers don't practice missing. That became one of my slogans in scenario training and self-defense. Never practice pulling, never practice missing, because your body will do that in the real fight. And the thing with wrestlers and boxers is everything they do, football players, is everything they do is real contact.
Well, it's always appreciated, Frank Mayer. Hey, it's not my job to get you to tap. You tap so I don't break your fucking arm. And I always thought that was an incredible, because most people are like, oh, they're going for the submission, they're going for the tap, which is, very similar within the BJJ. His deal is, I'm going to fucking break your neck, I'm going to break your arm. You have to tap to get me to stop from fucking you up. And that's instantly made me a Frank Mayer fan. But I have always said that for all of the martial arts and everything you want to get into, the 2 people you don't want to face is even an amateur, well-skilled boxer or a dude that wrestled at a high level, because those individuals understand how to fucking grind and how to go hard. All right, so we got Muhammad Ali, we got Marvin Hagler, we got Sugar Ray. Who's your other 2?
Was it 6 or 5?
5. So we got 3. We got 2 more.
I thought I did 4. Hold on a second.
No, you gave me Muhammad Ali, you gave me Hagler, and you gave me Sugar Ray Robinson.
Sugar Ray Leonard.
Oh, you're going to throw Sugar
Leonard
Ray Leonard
for sure.
Okay.
And the another hero, I got to hang out with Leonard a couple times. Had him in my car one day when he was fighting Duran in Montreal, 1980. This is a crazy story. Someone comes into the gym and Leonard, who didn't idolize that? Leonard?
No, incredible.
And someone comes into the gym and they go, hey, did you hear Leonard Duran, Olympic Stadium? I'm like, oh my God. And I turn to, there's 6 people standing there. I can't wait to meet him. How are you going to meet Sugar Ray Leonard? I don't know. I'll figure it out. I got to meet him. I got to talk to him, because he would do things in the ring that Bruce Lee wrote about.
Yeah.
So I go to the Paul Sauvé Arena where they're doing the warm-ups, when they do the stuff for the public. And it was like, I'd never seen security like this. 80,000 people for the Olympic Stadium. This place is packed. And I've got a magazine that I want him signed in a plastic bag and Sharpies, and I'm squeezed up to the front door, and there's 2 giant bodyguard security. And I hear one of them say, I've never seen this many people and this tight security. I can't even go to the bathroom without letting somebody know and getting permission. And at the time, 1980, I was helping coach doing calisthenics and warm up like a semi-pro baseball team. And I had access to an old school basketball gym where we would do the stuff, but it was like wooden floor, really old school, beautiful. And I had keys to the place. And I see these 2 giant guys, part of Leonard's entourage. And I say to the guys, I go, hey, what do you guys do on the weekend? Like, do you have the fights next week? You're here for a week. Would you like a private place? No press, no nothing. Play basketball, old school gym, wooden floor. And they're like, Guy gives me his card. He says, call me later. I call him later. They invite me to the hotel. Roger and Kenny Leonard, Ray's manager at the time, comes down. They want to meet me. Are you for real? I tell them the whole thing. They go, okay, let's set this up. We can go tomorrow. And we'll meet you there. Guys are all on the bus. I'm waiting to go. And Kenny Leonard comes up to me. He says, hey, man, something happened with the limo company, and they fucked up. Do you have a car? I go, yeah. Can you take a couple guys over? Sure. Okay, you're going to take Ray and his 2 bodyguards. I'm like, I haven't met the guy yet. I go, did you just say Ray? Like, I don't know him as Ray, right?
Yeah.
And so he comes down. He shakes hands like this with me. He goes, hey.
Yeah.
Like this. Soft. I'm like, wow, that was really incongruent. Like, I'm like, holy shit. We get it. I'm driving a Monza, this tiny, I don't know if you know Monza, tiny car. Literally, the back seat is tiny. Like, these guys are like your size bigger. They had to open the back windows for their elbows so they could both fit in the car. Sugar Ray gets in the car, get a console. They've got the Iron Mind, I think. I don't think they were around then. Like, it's some sort of hand grip. Yeah. He picks up my hand grip. He puts his foot up on the console, and he goes, how you doing, Toe? And I go, I couldn't talk. I was freaking out, man.
Yeah.
We end up, he goes there. He can't play because he can't risk jamming a thumb. On the court, I'm playing 21 with Sugar Ray Leonard, like the first day meeting him. Horse, doing shit. And every so often, he would stop because he's visualizing the fight. He'd wait for my shot, and he'd be moving and slipping and visualizing the most insane experience. He gave me tickets to the fight. Do you remember his old Franklin boxing stuff? He gave me a tracksuit and that. So
I think they're reprinting that on, like, what's it, like Roots of Fights, or
are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and what's insane is that years later is doing stunt work in movies. Robert Conrad, Wild Wild West, semi-pro boxer, loved martial arts. I'm doubling him. And I go, this guy's like my childhood hero. I grew up in the 60s watching this. The first day on set, I wear the shirt Sugar Ray Leonard gave me, and you can't buy this anywhere. Yeah. Like, if you know anything about it, like, there's a team shirt. So I see him staring at me, and I'm hanging out. So I grab a coffee, and I walk near him, and he walks up to me, and he goes, I said, you're looking at my shirt, aren't you? He goes, yeah. I go, I have a gym. He goes, how many bags? I said, 10, and I have a ring. He said, I'll see you tomorrow, 6 a.m. And he fucking trained at my gym every morning before for this. I've had, like, insane stories of how I met Leonard, Robert Conrad, Stallone, like, insane stuff. My last fighter, that's 4, right?
Yep.
My last fighter is a toss-up because there's some like classic guys. Man. Oh, shit. I mean, because each era era had some amazing ones. No one's ever asked me this, like who are my faves. I would love certain things about different guys. I don't like Mayweather.
Yeah, I'm not a Mayweather fan.
I can appreciate how good he is, but I don't.
Well, I mean, I'm not a huge Conor McGregor fan, but the fact that Conor was able to go the round, I mean, he's not a boxer by skill trade,
right?
And to be able to get in there with probably one of the best defensive fighters to ever do this, and to be able to go the distance in that, I mean, that
it was impressive.
Yeah, it's super impressive.
Yeah.
And people shit on him about it, and I'm like, oh, like, these are individuals that have never been in the ring with a skilled fighter, and the fact that he was able to go and hold his own and hang. I mean, that to me, mad respect for him.
Did you see the Jake Paul fight versus Silva?
I did.
Do you think these are fixed? I don't.
So,
I mean, fixed so far. Let me.
I don't think, like, I have a hard time seeing Tyson Woodley or Anderson Silva taking a dive.
Right.
Like that's just
especially
not,
Anderson.
Yeah, that's just not within their DNA. Do I think that the Paul brothers train? Yes. Do I think that if they didn't come from YouTube and weren't fucking ass clowns, that we would see them, and if they were coming up within the ranks? I mean, they're big. They train their asses off. I mean, I've seen with, that they have well skilled.
They're boxers.
Yeah, they're boxers. The problem is they, whatever their pedigree, I guess you could say, their maturation process to boxing is so fucking weird. If they had grown up in Atlanta and, fought at the Y and Golden Gloves and this.
Or they've been doing it for 10 years and now they popped on the scene. But it is what it is.
Those individuals can box and they can throw punches. Now, do I believe that he twisted his glove and the dude dropped it? I mean, it looks bad. But I also know that there's no amount of money that I would want to do to go out there and get my fucking ass kicked and look like a fool.
And
those guys can box. So like if they were out there just fucking throwing.
Bruce Lee used to do this. Like is that I'm going to get ready for the move, or is that just loosening up your hands?
Well, I mean, if they were out there just throwing grapefruits and they didn't have footwork and they hadn't trained, but they look the part. Mm-hmm. They come in, they're well skilled, they understand about cutting a guy off in the ring. I mean, they have all the wherewithal to.
They got room to improve, but they're there.
Yeah, I mean, they're not. Going to go take on Tyson Fury for the heavyweight. I mean,
right.
You're not going to stack them up against a haggler and say, you know what, they're going to, do anything other than fucking get smashed. But they are skilled individuals. I have a hard time, and you never know really what's in a man's heart, but I have a hard time seeing Anderson Silva go and take a dive.
I agree.
I just don't think it happens.
So, racking my brain, I'm going to go with Jack Dempsey.
Okay.
And there's like other guys that and really it was with like Dempsey.
The stories of Dempsey's training, breaking concrete, and Rocky Marciano. Just those whole that genre of fighter where they were just absolute Spartan individuals. I mean, it was like a cup of coffee, some toast, and breaking rocks for training.
And I select that. It's almost like when in Rocky 3, was that with Drago versus
Rocky 4?
Rocky 4.
Yeah.
Like that's, running in, chopping wood, running in the snow, dragging shit versus, high tech stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the, and there were a lot of amazing, Joe Louis and Ezra Charles and all these like really,
Jack Johnson,
and when you look back at those guys, like how often they were fighting and how much they were getting paid.
Well, I mean, just the amount of fights that these individuals did compared. I mean, Mike Khabib, right, has 29 fights and retires in his prime, whatever. I mean, you're talking about
guys would do that in a
Sugar
year.
Ray Robinson, 201 fights. We had 3 of the same. I had Muhammad Ali. I mean, how do you have a list without Ali? I had Hagler, which is still one of my favorites. I had Sugar Ray Robinson, which is incredible. But I also have Roberto Duran. I love Roberto Duran. I mean, he fought. I mean, his first fight was in '68, and his last was in 2001. The guy fought for over 30 years. I mean, in five generations. I mean, unbelievable. 33 years active is incredible. And then I got to put Tyson in there.
Did I not put Tyson?
No, you didn't have Tyson. So Tyson was 128 1-2 with 84 knockouts. I mean, Tyson fought 128 times.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, when people ask me, one of the more impactful things I've ever seen was seeing Tyson sprinting out of the locker room with no socks on, black shorts, no entourage, no dancing, no bullshit, no music, just fucking storming out there and taking the fight to people. That to me, and just the head work, his ability to move his feet and get into different positions, and just fucking so explosive and so ferocious that if you could just bottle some of that, it's fucking magic to me.
Well, it's funny because in the Leonard Hearns fight, where Leonard knocked him out in the 12th round, 13th round, and when they were outside Caesar's Palace, 115 degrees, Leonard's eyes closed, and it starts off that what starts off is, I think after the 7th round, he hits him with that weird uppercut, turns into a 26 punch combination, and I would ask people, I'd say, how did Leonard beat, Hearns there? And people will always call that hook to the body and then that uppercut. And I go, what about the will, the tenacity, the audacity, the fear management? I mean, he was just getting blasted and nothing was working. And to stay in there and going, I'm going to figure this out, I'm going to figure this out. A lot of people don't look at that, you know, is that, and that's what I talk about, was like the mind navigates the body. You can have all the skill sets there, but we've seen world-class people get scared and get hurt. Lombardi, fatigue makes cowards of us all. Yeah. And suddenly, you know, you hear footsteps. That's right out of your community, right? Someone's like, oh, fuck. How close is this guy to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. What's neat about all of those fighters is they all did jab, cross, hooks, uppercuts, body shots, but the stuff that connects you or me to some of them were some of the intangible elements that made them unique, even though they had the same, you know, it's like I always say, recipes are available for everybody, ingredients are available for everybody. Some people can't cook, some restaurants suck. Yeah. So, you know, when you go, if, you know, there's, at one point I remember there's like 16,000 registered boxers in America. I don't know what the number is now, but I go name them. And like, you can only name who are the top, you know, fighters right now. You're going, you know, like,
well, I mean, the same thing in the NFL. It was a couple of years ago. I went to an event with Troy Benson, who I played with at the Eagles, and is, you know, big honcho in the NFL now. And he said, I think it was like in the last, I think it was like 40 years, some, you know, whatever the span was, about 40,000 guys played in the NFL. It was just over 1,000 guys played longer than 4 years.
Wow.
And people were like, no. And then all of a sudden you're going through and you're looking at the names and you're like, oh, yeah. Because it's one of those jobs where you either show up and they're there for a day or you play 10 years. And the guys that are there fucking camp out on their positions and become the best. And so it's a very, very small group of individuals, even though a large pool get put in, that ends up doing it for a long time at a high level. Same in boxing. You know, when you go through and you put in the best boxers and they list the top 100, it's from like 1801 to present day. Right. I mean, you're looking at like 100 plus years, you know, of span. And it's, you go through every, I mean, it's because it's such,
it's like grueling.
Well, there's nowhere to fucking hide. Yeah. And, you know, you have to be able to take those shots, and you have to be able to be resilient. You've got to be able to train, and you have to be in a condition in this. I mean, it's not just one, it's, and you got to be able to navigate it because it's such a nasty fucking business. You know, think about the Don King era, but, it's, I mean, it's, I love it. And, it's become, you know, like I felt like boxing died a little bit with the Klitschko's because they were so unexciting. And now with, you know, Tyson Fury and what we've seen within boxing, they've made it fun again. Fury is so awkward and so unconventional that like, it's like, you can't discount what he's doing. And he's going out there and he's fighting dudes, and he's, you know, I mean, he's fighting guys, and next thing you know, he's on sstage with Steve Aoki fucking doing drinks in Vegas. I mean, you know, he is kind of cut of that old school cloth. I just wish we could get him in better shape. Because he, I mean, before he kind of went into his spiral, he was pretty fit. You know, I was looking at some old stuff of him when he still had hair, and he kind of looked like his brother, was pretty fit, good shape, and then just fucking drugs and booze and coke and women
and destroyed him. And it's crazy because when Ali came back and he was out of shape, but he could still move, I didn't enjoy watching it as much because, like, I had that same, boxer, like a classic boxing body is very aesthetic. You know, it's not overly muscled, and you could just tell, okay, this guy's can move. Yeah. So it was weird. Even somebody who I loved, like Ali, when he came back after that big retirement.
I always think when. I think it was Dana White made an interesting point about once you get done and then you're out of your prime, go the fuck away and do something else. The problem is when these guys try to come back after the fact, you know, the proverbial George Foreman, I'm going to come back, and, you know, or Ali and these different fighters or guys that were still, you know, wanting to go in the ring and still take the shots. All of a sudden, those shots when you're 20, maybe even in late 20s, early 30s are fine. But now, all of a sudden, when you're taking in your late 30s and 40s, I believe the detriment and the damage is so much more severe later on that I think that's where those guys get fucked up. Pivot, quick top 5 MMA fighters of all time.
Wow. I wish you'd pre-brief me. I could.
I was going to throw the questions ahead of time, but I kind of wanted to see.
So Frank Shamrock.
Okay.
I thought he was, when he was in his prime, he was freaking insane. He could strike, he could grapple, he could kick, and he had the body, you know, like the physique. I think that I love Don Fry.
Yeah.
Just like salt of the earth. Like he said to me before the Tank Abbott fight, we had been there like for the week watching and getting to know the guys. And he said to me right before the fight, he leans in, puts his head near me. He says, "Pray for me, brother." I'm like, he was. Now, what's interesting is, like, why do you say that if you're not scared? You know, because it wasn't like a religious thing, like,
sure,
let's hold hands and
yeah.
he was, but it wasn't like his voice wasn't great. He knew he was going to fight.
Sure.
So it's a neat thing about how people process that. So not an order of stuff. I became a big Conor McGregor fan. There's things that I wish he didn't do. Obviously, you know, just like anyone else, you wish like, oh man, I wish I hadn't said that or done that. But so Frank Shamrock, Don Fry, Conor McGregor's up there. Love BJ Penn.
Mm-hmm.
And shit, I mean, like so many. And it's interesting because I think St. Pierre is amazing, but his style of fighting I didn't like.
Yeah.
Like in Mayweather, forget Mayweather's personality.
Yeah, I don't like what Mayweather style fighting is.
Right. So like St. Pierre, I can appreciate everything he did, but I wanted something more dramatic, little less wrestling. And George, if you're listening to this, I love you, man, and I'm kidding. You're number one. Just in case. It's me managing fear.
Yeah.
And so other guys, man, I'm trying to think of some old school guys.
I always liked Randy Couture. I was a big Randy Couture fan.
So
I like Chuck Liddell. I mean, just the fact he came out and threw fucking haymakers.
Yeah.
I think the MMA is kind of changed. I mean, you have this like John Jones, who's so fucking dominant, but you can't unfuck his life, kind of get out of his own way. You know, definite played with a lot of guys in the NFL, very similar. His brothers are playing in the NFL. These guys that live out on the rails, you know, they need to have this like fucking big highs, big lows to be successful. I just wish that he could just fucking rein it in. I mean, the guy had more title defenses than anybody and has been such a dominant fighter. I wanted to see the greatest in the world stand on the big stage and be successful, and I hate seeing self-sabotage.
So I would go. So I became friends with Randy, and actually donated a bunch of high gear to his facility in Vegas, so guys could train. What was crazy is, do you remember Evan Tanner?
Mm-mm.
So Evan Tanner was one of the early OG guys, and real interesting guy. He bought high gear personally. He recognized, hey, we're beating the shit out of our bodies. You can't practice ground and pound without pulling it or damaging. So he bought high gear on his own volition back when you couldn't afford it, like just to do it. He was out. He ended up tragically passing away in the desert on just got lost and didn't have the resources, and so that was crazy. But Evan, I didn't know this. Evan had started training with Randy. This is before the first Ultimate Fighter show. I'm in Vegas, and I knew a bunch of the guys. I used to go to like a ton of the fights and stuff, and so I knew Dana peripherally, Joe Silva, because they brought me in that original one where I sucked so bad, and I managed to create a meeting with Couture. We get together, and I got the suit in the bag, and I'm explaining, listen, you can do ground and pound, you can drop elbows, like you can't do that with somebody with a conventional boxing headgear on. So this allows you to protect the fighter. I'm doing my whole spiel, and he goes, well, let me see it already. And I open it up, he takes it out, and he goes, this is your gear? He says, I've been using this for like months. Evan Tanner brought it into the gym. So it was a pretty funny anecdotal story. But Couture, why I loved Couture the most is the transformation he did.
Yeah.
Remember I said earlier with the boxers, there's some attribute about them because everyone had the courage to walk into the ring. Everyone fought hard. They didn't tap early. They gave everything. And each, like Liddell was known for his wild left hook.
Yeah.
And Couture was known for
his dirty boxing,
his tenacity and his inside the clinching and just the. But my favorite thing when I think of Couture was transforming his body so that he looked like Captain America.
Yeah.
So that because they're all these guys are good fighters.
Sure.
So, but Couture definitely.
The only other one I got to throw in there is Horace Gracie.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, like the first UFC #1, incredible. I mean, goes in there. And it's kind of interesting. You see him measuring these guys measuring, and then the minute he kind of figures it out,
draws their attack, and then
and that was really how the world got introduced to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When now all of a sudden, here's a guy who very unassuming comes in and is able to submit these guys. And dude, I think that really altered the trajectory of this thing.
If your question was, I mean, I have huge respect for Royce for that. If your question was most influential or most important MMA guys, I'd have put him as #1 for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to have GSP in there, even though his style of fighting wasn't exciting.
Yeah,
incredibly dominant, and considered one of the best to ever do it. But
amazing.
I really I definitely dig Khabib, and I all the Dagestan fighters. I mean, the Sambo and their whole deal. Those guys are. They're bringing something in that's making him dominant, and the other fighters will pick it up.
And certain people, like for a brief period, Clay Guida, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you got Diego Sanchez for there was a few fights where you went, this kid is insane, and then something happens, and it's weird because
there's so many fights. So this is the thing I love about the UFC or UFC. I mean. There's so many fights. I mean, it's I think there's one tonight.
Right.
There was. Alex Parita just fought recently. I mean, the amount of fights that they're doing, it's such a high volume that, somebody kicks ass. There's going to be somebody next and next and next. I mean, there's new champions happening all the time. It's maybe a guy in boxing fights once, maybe twice a year. I mean, Fury fought, and now he's going to have another fight. I mean, it's just
every weekend.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, every weekend you have a chance for a new, superhero, for a new individual to stand on the podium. And
people, as much as we love boxing, in terms of grit and grind and gruel, I made a joke after the Holyfield fight. I go, if boxing said, let's allow biting into clinching when Tyson bit him, I said for a month or two, there'd be more bites. And then we would figure out how to clinch in a way that protected our ears. And we developed the awareness, okay, push the guy away now, hit him with an uppercut. So imagine, the early UFCs where you had, elbows and headbutts and to protect yourself from kicks, okay, I'm in a clinch. Okay, foot stomp, kick the calf, uppercut, punch the leg, all the shit you can do, snap the head. It's insane what these guys do to their bodies and what they do to get ready for a fight like that. It's insane.
We've seen this evolution, and now the guys that are really doing well have a background within wrestling. Mm-hmm. They've effective wrestlers. They've learned BJJ, so they know submission. So it's kind of been this catch wrestling, submission, BJJ kind of deal. And then all of a sudden you bring in guys that are strikers. And it kind of goes this way, and then all of a sudden a guy, comes in and is a monster.
Remember Machida?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. I mean,
so you have there's so many greats. Remember what was the classic?
Think about Ronda Rousey, right? An incredible judo player goes in, is crushing everybody. Holly Holm comes in, all of a sudden now she's fucking keeping her distance. Skilled boxer, catches her with a big kick.
That was insane.
And I mean, Ronda was an absolute fucking buzzsaw. She was killing people. And you bring in somebody that has a different style. And the crazy part is she was on a talk show leading up to the fight, talking exactly about what she was expecting to happen with Holly. And she came out and did it exactly as she described. So she knew what was going to happen. And it became a worse reality. I mean, so it just goes to show that the minute that all of a sudden somebody's at the top and is showing a skill set that looks unfathomable and impossible to beat, somebody else walks in that has slightly different skill set and absolutely wrecks. I mean,
the expression, styles make fights.
Yeah.
And it's neat. It's again, two things. One is, did you watch the tape and figure out what you need to do? Mm-hmm. And then if that's not working, can you pivot? Can you adapt and create like something else? So
it's the Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until they get knocked down.
Yeah. So guess what? Mike Tyson wasn't the first person to say that. Google this, research this. It was the great Joe Louis. But Tyson made it famous, and only because it came up here, I had to say that.
Okay.
Because people say that. It was, I believe it was Joe Louis, and he said everyone's going to plan until they get hit, something to that effect. Tyson, is a huge boxing historian.
Sure.
So he probably quoted Joe Louis at some point, and then somebody quoted Mike Tyson said this to me.
Yeah, and then it just gets lost.
And then it becomes that. But as a boxing nut, you'll appreciate that. Do the research and because I think the origin was way before that. But it's like the military expression, like, no plan survives first contact.
Sure.
Right. So.
Well, dude, that's all I got.
Nice. Very interesting conversation.
No, it was incredible. I mean, we started on this interesting cascade into fear and understanding, and more importantly, how to manage it. And I got to finish up with what I consider one of the more things that I was excited for you to come talk about was one, boxing,
fighting,
MMA, fighting, and styles in this.
And the thing that for your listeners is this still has very much to do with everything in the first part of the conversation. All of these martial artists, combatives guys, MMA guys, they've all to one degree or another figured out through osmosis or good coaching how to manage fear and direct it into something. Because if you look at, there's two guys in the ring and there's 20,000 people going, boo.
Yeah.
I'd have done this. I'd have done that.
Yeah.
I remember one fight where Diego's getting his ass kicked. Imagine this. My family, of course, has been around all of this. We moved to California, and my daughter Olivia's 8 or 9 years old. I go, listen, we've had a crazy year. I want to spend some time with you. What do you want to do? We're in California now. We got marine land or whatever they call it. We got Disney over here. What do you want to do? And my 8-year-old says, I want to go to Vegas and watch a UFC with you. And I'm going, your mom's not going to believe you said that. She's going to think that. This is a true story, John.
Yeah.
And I go, come here right now. Tell mom what you just said. And she goes, I want to go to UFC and I want to go to Vegas and watch a UFC with dad. And my wife, Jessie, looks at me. She's like, so I make it happen. We go, we're there. And because I know people, like, we're there early. We're watching them build the octagon. We're in early. She's getting autographs, meeting the fighters. We got decent seats. We're sitting there, and behind us is like a drunk group of guys yelling, Uma Plata, freaking all leg. They're just calling moves, right?
Yeah.
I'd have done this. I'd have done that. And my daughter Olivia is like looking at me like this, rolling her eyes, and Diego's getting pounded, right? And these guys are going, come on, man, shrimp. And they're calling up moves. And
side survival.
My daughter's rolling her eyes. So I look at her, I go, what do you think? She's like, what do you think Diego should be doing? She goes, that's obvious, Dad. I go, what is it? Out of the mouths of an 8-year-old. She goes, it's obvious. He needs to stop getting punched in the face so much. Like,
seems simple.
Good instructions. Like, Diego, stop getting punched in the face. So very, very, very interesting. But all of this, I believe, comes back to how we perform is intrinsically connected to what we're thinking. How we think affects how we feel affects how we think. Both influence how we move. And so the more you understand about the unconscious, conscious effects of fear, even if your type A personality can't say the word fear, I'm just a little bit nervous before this, or I don't know, man, I'm not hungry right now. Like, if you can lean into that and go, what is that? And the more you understand it, that's why I asked you, I never finished it, if you ever done an armorer's course. I tell people, like, if you do an armorer's course where you're not doing any live fire, I believe you're a better shooter after the course because you've demystified the operating system. When you better understand your operating system, you can go, oh, fuck, I'm thinking these negative thoughts. That's an emotional weight. If you've been ever waiting for potentially good news, bad news, and you get good news, the first thing you do when you get good news is stand up. Someone's like, phone rings. Yes, like we stand up. And so I use that as a metaphor. What is the weight of fear? You get good news and you stand up. It's like this weight has been lifted off you. Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of us, minus the unicorns, John, for a lot of us, if we don't cultivate the self-awareness to go, fear is weighing me down, I can't perform at my best. If I change my relationship with fear, I change my mind. If I can change my mind, I can change my path. I can suddenly make these shifts that change the quality of my life.
Dude, I love it. So that's all I got. Dude, that was great, Tony. Thank you so much for coming to Austin and doing Power Athlete Radio, dude. It was great to connect. I mean, we haven't seen each other in person in a few years. So yeah. It was awesome to have you, and really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, and it's very, very different. This would not have worked on Zoom to this degree.
Not at all. No, this is way better.
The chemistry's way better, so 100%.
Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Power Athlete Radio.